Although it may not seem like it, election season is actually winding down with less than a few weeks to go. And some of you may still have questions about things like voter ID laws and measures on the Missouri ballot. We're going to talk about that today with Kathleen Farrell. She's the co-president of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis. Please stay with us next on City Corner. Hi, I'm Sarah Thompson and welcome to City Corner. Election season has been upon us for some time now, and now it's winding down. And some of you at home might still have some questions about voter ID laws, some of the measures on the Missouri ballot. Today I'm joined by Kathleen Farrell. She's the co-president of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis. We're going to talk about these issues as well as the organization's history and mission. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a busy time of year. November 6th is just around the corner. It's been a busy season for you, hasn't it?
It certainly has, and this is an election which has gotten really high interest. 70 million people watched the first presidential debate.
70 million.
That was the largest audience that they'd had in over 16 years, so I think people are really tuned in.
No, I didn't realize it was that many people. I want to start off with something that isn't necessarily affecting Missouri per se, but it's a hot topic right now, which is voter ID laws, and it's pretty controversial. Tell me a bit more about it from your perspective and from the perspective of the League of Women Voters.
Okay. Well, the League has been very opposed to all kinds of efforts in the states to suppress voting, and we call it voter suppression. And 13 states in the last 2 years have enacted laws that put up obstacles for people to vote. The most common of these is what we call photo voter ID laws. And that's when voters are now required to use certain kinds of government-issued photo IDs in order to vote. The League has been involved in 11 lawsuits trying to stop these kinds of laws, because these laws really hurt primarily the elderly, the disabled, minority populations. There's lots of folks out there who came north with the northern migration to a city like St. Louis, were probably born at home. Perhaps a midwife did not file a birth certificate, or there's mistakes on their birth certificate. So it's not just getting the voter ID, but it's also getting the documentation to get it.
Right.
In lots of places you have to have, if you're a woman, for example, and older women are disproportionately affected by this. You'd have to have a birth certificate, a certified one with a raised seal. You'd have to have a marriage certificate. If you'd been divorced and changed your name, you'd have to have a copy of that divorce decree. And it's very difficult.
And I think it's important to note that you're a nonpartisan group.
We are.
Explain to me how you take stances on things that, because a lot of people would argue that a voter ID law, a lot of these have been implemented by the Republican Party or officials, but yet this is here you are speaking on behalf of a nonpartisan group.
Right.
Tell me how the League of Women Voters makes a stance on certain issues.
Okay. Well, the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan, and what that means is that we don't endorse candidates. We also don't endorse political parties, but we do take positions on issues, and we have always done that. And at our heart are protecting elections and protecting voters. So we take very clear positions against voter suppression. We take very firm positions about open elections and accessible elections. We believe it should be as easy to vote as possible. And we also are working on campaign finance, because we think that Citizens United has destroyed much of the electoral process, and we're involved in that kind of work. We're also involved in other kinds of issues. We take positions on health care. For example, we support the Affordable Care Act. We also support public schools. We support reproductive rights, and we work against the restriction of them. What the League does before it takes a position is that the League studies an issue. And as a matter of fact, the League is a national organization, and it has a state level and also a local level. So depending on what the issue is, we study those issues for more than a year. We have groups of our members all over the country, thousands of them who come together. We reach consensus on what we agree on an issue, and we craft a position.
I see.
And then we use those positions to advocate at the local level, the state level, the national level, when those issues come up. So for example, our national president this year has testified in Congress several times about photo ID. She's also testified about Citizens United and campaign finance. She's testified about healthcare reform, certain environmental measures that we have positions on. We're for good government and good government services.
And the League's been around for, I don't want to kind of jump ahead of what we're going to talk about, but the League's been around since, what, 1920 or so. So you have quite a bit of, obviously, clout and sort of esteem in terms of in terms of organizations when it comes to voting and politics and issues.
We have, and as a matter of fact, we started right here in St. Louis, which is interesting. So in 1919, the League of Women Voters started in St. Louis. As a matter of fact, the year before, when the Democratic National Convention was in St. Louis, over 10,000 suffragettes lined the streets down by what is now the Renaissance Hotel, and made the men who came into that convention walk among them. And they stood there in what we call the walkless, talkless parade with their mouths taped shut, because they said without a vote, they had no voice. Now in 1919, when it became clear that the amendment to give women the right to vote was going to be ratified, those women were in St. Louis. They got on a train and joined other women from around the country in Chicago and formed the League of Women Voters, because they said, look, there's still a lot to do.
Absolutely.
We need to have informed voters. We need to advocate for voters. And as a matter of fact, one of the very first things that the League did was to start citizen groups, citizen education schools, to work with people to learn how to vote and to learn how to vote intelligently.
Let's jump to some of the sort of the issues or the measures on the Missouri ballot coming up for November 6th, and maybe your stance. We can start off with, is there one you in particular you want to start off with? Maybe the tobacco sort of tax and initiative. I know the other day I was reading something in the Post where it was an opinion piece, and they're like, is this a tax on the poor and this and that by raising the cigarette tax? I mean, what's your stance on something like that?
Well, as a matter of fact, there are 4 statewide ballot proposals on the ballot. We have taken positions in 3 of them. So in terms of the increased tobacco tax, we are for that.
Okay.
Missouri has the lowest tobacco tax in the country, 17 cents. Illinois has a tax of $1.98.
Really?
We also have the 11th highest smoking rates and the 5th highest smoking rates for young people in this state. So we feel that a tax of 90 cents actually will be good for Missouri. It'll keep some people from smoking. It's also interesting to think about where the money that's going to be raised from that is going to go. So 50% is going to go to public education, which is seriously underfunded in Missouri, and that's K through 12. 30% is going to go to higher education, which has suffered serious cuts lately, with increases in student populations at universities. And 20% is going to go to something that Missouri has never funded before, and that's smoking cessation programs.
Really?
Right now, we don't put a cent into those as a state. And so we believe that this will help people stop the smoke. Now, we know that that tax is going to hurt people who are addicted to nicotine. And we hope that these smoking cessation programs can help. We also know that Missouri spends an awful lot of money taking care of people who are suffering and dying from smoking-inflicted diseases. So we have a number of positions in terms of health care and better health, in terms of having fair taxation, et cetera, that allow us to support that measure.
Well, speaking of health care, there's also another measure on the ballot that has to do with that, and a special
health care exchanges. Yes. And that can be confusing. There is a measure on the ballot that would prohibit the governor and state agencies from setting up what the Affordable Health Care requires to be set up. The Affordable Health Care says that each state must have in place what they call a health care insurance exchange. and that is supposed to be in place by January 2014.
Okay.
Healthcare exchanges are policies by insurance companies that all meet certain requirements of the Affordable Care Act. They cover preventative care, for example. They must offer certain levels of coverage so that people who don't have very much money can buy coverage. They cannot exclude anyone from pre-existing conditions or age. And those are vetted by the state to make sure that they're good, and then they're maintained. And what that means is, you remember that the Supreme Court validated the Affordable Care Act this summer, including the individual mandate, which said that people had to have insurance. And so what this does is it allows individuals to purchase insurance that they can afford and that's good, and that each state needs to do that. Now, it's important because the federal government will help to subsidize those people who cannot afford to pay that entire premium themselves. Now, what this ballot proposal does is it says the state of Missouri doesn't want to follow the federal law.
Right.
That's in essence what it says. And the League of Women Voters believes that's wrong, and it also believes that the best way to extend medical care to everyone, which we believe in, it's our position, is to put this into place. And therefore, we are opposing this. Now, it's interesting because if this passes, if we say, in essence, the governor and the state agencies aren't going to do it, the federal government's going to come in and do it for us.
Right, right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. I want to, when we come back, resume this and also talk about Prop A and some other programs that the League of Women Voters have going on, all in connection to the upcoming elections. Upcoming, it's November 6th. It's a couple weeks
they're right
away.
around the corner.
So we're going to take a short break, but please stay with us because there's much more to come.
Welcome. I understand you need a little help with your mortgage. Want to avoid foreclosure. Smart move. Candy? Well, you know, you're in luck. We're experts in this sort of thing. Mortgage, rigmarole, whatnot.
Really?
Absolutely. And we guarantee results, you know, for a small fee, of course. Such are the benefits of having a professional on your side. Why don't we get a contract? Who wants a contract?
Here you go, Pete.
Thanks, Betty.
Write a toner.
I'll get on it. Sign it. Come on, sign it. Families around the country every single day, saving homes.
We will talk it over with.
What?
If you're facing foreclosure, make sure you're talking to the right people. Speak with HUD-approved housing counselors free of charge at 888-995-HOPE.
Thanks for calling the GED Pep Talk Center. Jerry Stiller speaking. Your level 7 in-your-face pep talk.
I can keep pushing. Believe me, I'm good at it.
Once you've got your GED diploma, you'll feel so good about yourself.
You tell him.
Mr. Trejo, can I transfer this guy to you? He needs something a little more
Persuasive.
Yes.
Whatever motivation you need, we've got a pep talk for you. Get your GED pep talk and find free classes at yourged.org.
Hi, I'm Sarah Thompson, and welcome back to City Corner. Today we're talking with Kathleen Farrell. She's the co-president of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis. And we've been going over some of the ballot measures on the November 6th, on the upcoming election. We cut off at Proposition E, talking about healthcare. Is there anything that you wanted to finish up about that?
Well, we've taken a position against it, and I think that people need to read it very carefully. And there's a lot of information out there about this issue, and certainly in our voter's guide there is, because people are confused about what it means.
Now let's talk about the Prop A, which is the Municipal Police Amendment. And this has kind of been circulating a lot here in the city, obviously, and really across the state, though. I hear people talking about it. What's the stance on that for the League of Women
Well, we
Voters?
didn't take a position on that because we didn't have a position that could be applied to it. You'll see in our voter's guide, and as a matter of fact, on all of these issues, we not only explain them, we also go through the pros and cons of each. So even though we've taken a position, which we state, we do that for the voter. And the police independence is a very interesting issue. You know that it goes back to the Civil War, when a governor who was secretly plotting with the Confederacy wanted to protect the arsenal on Arsenal Street, which is actually where I live, so I find this interesting, and therefore took over the St. Louis Police Department. This police independence is supported by people who say, you know, the city is paying all of the freight, they're paying the bills. This should be locally controlled. The people who oppose it, and for example, the ACLU opposes it, the Police Officers Association withdrew their opposition to it. But they're concerned about the ability to investigate police misconduct.
I see.
And they're also concerned about putting politics even more into the St. Louis Police Department. So there are two sides to this issue.
Yes, because I did notice when I was reading about it that there was sort of a clause in there about something about a retaliation factor for internal investigations or something, which I thought was interesting, but I didn't realize that a lot
it's
of
a
that stemmed from
whistleblowing kind of thing. But on the other hand, if you can't talk to sources, the people who oppose this say it limits your ability to investigate police misconduct. So there are two sides to this issue.
Okay, and let's move to Amendment 3, the state judiciary sort of measure that's up. Tell me a bit more about that.
Well, we have something in Missouri that we're proud of called the Nonpartisan Missouri Court Plan. What it did was it set up a commission of qualified citizens and the Supreme Court Justice to look at applications for judgeships and then recommend to the governor a certain number of individuals who, from that list, someone would have to be appointed. What this proposition does is it weakens that commission and increases the political power of the governor. So the governor has more appointment power, and it would remove the Supreme Court Justice from that commission, which we think is a serious loss of expertise. And this commission would also then forward 4 names to the governor. So we think it increases political power, puts more politics into the courts, and we think that's a bad thing. We're opposed to it.
Right, because I've read that Missouri thus far has been pretty...
It was the model.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how these things sort of creep in. I mean, politics just blows my mind every day because it's just something is always creeping in. That,
history.
That gets in. Well, let's talk about some of the programs that you specifically have going on here in St. Louis.
Sure. There is one more proposition that I think is of interest to your viewers, and that is the decrease of the number of aldermen in the city of St. Louis.
How can we not forget that one?
We have not taken a position on this issue. There are pros and cons to it. The people who are for this say, look, we've lost all this population. It makes no sense to have this size. And also we need to change the districts so it's not the north against the south or certain areas of the city as little kingdoms. The people who oppose it say, look, these aldermen and alderwomen do great service for people. That's how the system works in St. Louis. And so they're opposed to it.
Right.
So
the interesting thing about that one too is when they talk about how much money that could potentially be saved, you know, the other side says, but we don't know, they'll have to increase their staff as a result. And so then is it really actually saving money? And it comes back to that point in politics sometimes that people put things forward, we vote on them, they get enacted, and we don't necessarily really have any clue what the outcome could actually be. We can project it, but we don't really know.
We can look at other cities who've done it.
And what do you feel when you've
I think
looked at
that there are
other cities
pros
that-
and cons. I think it would probably increase the professionalization of the city. I think that as a citizen of the city, I call my alderperson when I can't get the trash folks to move the bin from in front of my garage door and things like that. So I know that that's how you get things done. So I haven't decided how I'm going to vote on that one yet.
That's good. I will say that I agree in that point too. I feel with same thing with my alderman Joe Rohde. It's like pretty accessible. So
Right.
Well, let's move on to some of the programs. Tell me about Kid Vote USA.
Okay, we teamed up with Kids Voting Missouri this year, and what Kids Voting Missouri does is really good service in the St. Louis area in terms of going into schools, showing kids how to register to vote, and it has 3 different programs for K through 3, 4 through 8, and then 8 through 12 of having kids vote for different candidates. And it actually has elections, and it shows them the results school by school. They do a wonderful job. What they needed to add was teaching these students that they need to have information to vote. So because we have such good information about through our voter's guide, which I'm going to tell you about in a second, what we did is we teamed up with Kids Voting, and each teacher, so hundreds of teachers now have a lesson plan that we developed on how to teach students how to research candidates and issues. And our volunteers, we targeted 3 school districts, St. Louis Public Schools, Jennings, and Valley Park this year, to work with the teachers in the schools to help students learn how to do this. The computer-based voter's guide is excellent for students. They love it. It's easy to use. And of course, they take this home to their parents and their families.
I think it's really, I think that's excellent. And the reason I say that is finally when students, when they do turn 18, and they have the right to vote, they'll know about if it's a presidential election or maybe if it's a mayoral election or some of the big stuff that hits. But when it comes to ballot measures, propositions that are out there, if they don't know, they don't know, and they're only hearing about it from media, which can sometimes take a slant about that. So it is important to get that implemented. You mentioned the voters guide. Tell me a bit more about that.
That's a huge project. 2 years ago, we teamed up with the Post-Dispatch, who asked us to team up with them. And we produce a voter's guide on every candidate and every issue in 6 counties and the city. It covers the Post-Dispatch's area. So sometimes we have 1,300 candidates in an April local election that we cover. We send out questionnaires to all of the candidates. They answer those questions. We research all the ballot initiatives, including pros and cons. And we produce this in an online guide called Vote 411. You can get it on the League of Women Voters of St. Louis website, and also through the Post at stltoday.com. You click on there, you put in your address, it prints you out a ballot and says, here's what's on your ballot. And then you can read side by side all of the candidates' positions. You can watch videos of the candidates.
Do you see that as one of the main overall goals or mission, part of the mission of the League of Women Voters is really about educating the public? And
very much.
And because how would you feel if the League didn't do that, or if there wasn't such an organization?
That's the heart of the League. And the League does 3 things. It registers voters. We have registered thousands of voters this year. We register every single naturalized citizen who wants to be registered. As a matter of fact, our volunteers are doing that. They did it yesterday in time for those citizens to vote. We educate, and then we advocate on the issues, as you and I have been discussing. But education is the heart of who we are. We had over 200,000 hits on Vote 411 in the August primary. And we expect, close to 500,000 for the general election. In addition to that online voter's guide, we know that lots of folks are not computer savvy. The Post gives us 20,000 copies of that. Our volunteers, over 50 volunteers, hand carry those to 160 different locations, libraries in all those counties in the city, and YMCAs and senior centers and assisted living centers. The Schnuck stores carry them. Starbucks carries them, and we carry them to any place who wants them. We also provide them free of charge to any citizen who calls our office and asks for a printed copy of that guide. So we do that.
You're doing something exciting coming up on Election Day, is that correct? Tell me about that.
We have an election hotline. We've always had one at the league office on every election. But this year, KMOV, Channel 4, the local CBS affiliate, asked us if we would do an election hotline, and we said yes. So what they're doing is they are going to have an election hotline for voters who have problems the entire election day. From 5:30 in the morning, we're going to be there till after 7 when the polls close. And we're going to have 5 volunteers on 4 shifts who can answer questions for voters, help them, report problems, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a wonderful service.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And KMOV is going to start advertising this about a week before the election at every newscast. So citizens can call either the league office or KMOV for help.
Okay, and before we close up, we're going to have a graphic too for people to go to your website and see, because your website is really extensive in terms of the amount of information on there. I mean, it's a go-to, like a one-stop for a lot of the to answer questions that people might have. Speaking of the league and joining and becoming a member, who can join? Because it's not just women, correct?
It's not, and I didn't wear my button that says the league is not for women only. Actually, we have almost 50 male members now in St. Louis. We have approximately 400 members in St. Louis. And we have lots of men who've joined us. As a matter of fact, I was in the office yesterday. There were 2 men who were volunteering in the office. Our phones are ringing off the hook.
Really?
People wanting to know about absentee ballots, people worried about voter ID. Remember that when you go to the polls, you don't have to show a driver's license. There's a number of IDs you can show, including your utility bill. If you go to the league's website and also look in the printed guide, we have examples of all of the IDs that you can use. We were lucky in Missouri. We got the governor through a letter writing campaign to veto the photo ID bill there, so it's important to know.
But in terms of membership, I mean, are you trying actively
We
to
are
grow your
trying
membership?
to, and as a matter of fact, we've really worked hard to reach out in the community, particularly the city, and our membership has grown. We're proud of that. All you have to do is either go to our website or call the league office, and we'll send you by mail an application form. We have a very modest membership fee. And some people are very active, and if you've heard anything about these activities that interest you, registering voters, candidate forums, a voter's guide, whatever, just join the League of Women Voters. Even if you can't come to a lot of meetings, you can support our work.
It's good to be involved. No, well, this has been an extremely informative 30 minutes, I got to tell you that. And I hope you at home have enjoyed it as well. And Kathleen, thank you for being here. And as we just mentioned, go to the League of Women Voters of St. Louis, to their website. We have that information. Also, you can follow, get more information on our website on stltv.net and see the video on YouTube later on. Thank you, Kathleen, for joining us, and thank you at home. And please keep it right here on STL TV.